will get going, and I'll say hello and welcome to this very special webinar. My name is Lydia Woolley. I'm a program manager at Lloyd's Register Foundation. So wherever you are joining us from around the world, we welcome you here today to hear more about this deep dive report into seafarer sustainability. This report, which was carried out for us by the World Maritime University, was published by Lloyd's Register Foundation at the end of March. So in a moment, we're going to hear from the authors who will be bringing us the background and key findings of the report. And after that, we'll hear their thoughts and those of our panel. But today, chiefly, we'd like to hear your questions and comments through the Q&A on this webinar. And that's located along the tab at the top just next to chat. So do put your questions in there. So we hope to get through as many as we can in this hour. And any questions that we don't get time to answer, we will pull together as an article and publish on our website. I'm firstly going to hand over to Dr. Olivia Swift, who is Head of Maritime Systems at Lloyd's Register Foundation, who is going to set the scene by giving us a brief overview of the Global Maritime Trends programme of work that this deep dive is part of. So Olivia, over to you.
Thanks, Lydia. Welcome all. So as Lydia suggested there, this report is part of a wider programme of work called Global Maritime Trends. That programme of work is a partnership between us at Lloyd's Register Foundation and our group, Lloyd's Register, which began in 2023 with the publication of a report by the same name, Global Maritime Trends, which we commissioned from Economist Impact. Now, that report considered how the maritime economy would change over coming years based on large macro trends, social trends, geopolitical trends, technical trends, etc. And the deep dives that follow on from that initial report and will be coming out over subsequent years, this is the first one, they all pick up on those changes and ask what planning is needed to respond to them. So why are we doing this? Well, essentially, we believe that for maritime to be safe, and as a foundation, our mission is about engineering a safer world, we need the best possible foresight to be freely available to anyone making decisions about any aspect of maritime's future. So that's what the Global Maritime Trends programme is all about. This deep dive on seafarer sustainability responds to two specific changes that were anticipated in the Economist Impact report. The first was that the number of African seafarers would increase in coming years considerably, and also that we'd have many, many more women seafarers, an increase on the very small percentage that we have today. These two sort of predictions, if you like, were based on the shift in, well, the population shift. So we know that we have a very large and youthful African population. And they were also based on anticipated technological developments in maritime that would produce, so thought the Economist Impact Group, new opportunities for women to operate ships remotely. So before we hear more about what the report says about those changes, I will hand.
Great. Thank you, Olivia. So let's turn to that very report. The deep dive on seafarer sustainability, supporting the opportunity for Africa and women to create a sustainable supply of seafarers for the future. So there are three authors of the report: Professor Jens Schroeder-Hinrich, Professor Momoko Kitada, and Dr. Rennis Ojwala.
Just first start with this short presentations to summarize the outcome of this deep dive on seafarer sustainability, supporting the opportunity for Africa and women to create sustainable supply of seafarers for the future. Next slide, please. So, Olivia kindly introduced us already, but just to quickly, once again, this is the team of the WMU. We had two co-principal investigators, myself, Tomoko Kitada. I'm holding a Nippon Foundation Professorial Chair in Gender and Innovation, and also the head of Maritime Education and Training. We also have Professor Jens Schroeder-Hinrich. He's the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives. And also the most important, our African female researcher, the postdoc Dr. Renis Oma Ojuara, who is presenting soon the key findings of this report. So these are the very small team that we are conducted the study. The next slide, please. So already highlighted by the Register Foundations about the motivation of this research. It was originally coming from this Economist Global Maritime Trends 2050, which highlighted that how we can make sure the sustainable shipping industry. And when it comes to the focusing on the people side, there are two key issues that raised by this report. So one is the prediction of the growing number of African young population will be potential the kind of people, the talented people to resourcing to the maritime industry. And also the women's seafarers to be 25% of the whole seafarer supply populations, which is good kind of predictions or futuristic scope. However, when we actually looking at the current figures, the Africa is only representing the 4% of the whole seafaring population according to the BIMCO and ICS report 2021, which is still the latest estimation which is available. You can see at the bottom of this diamond that you can see that how Africa's seafarer population is estimated as small. And also the women seafarers are estimated as 1.28% of the total seafaring population. As you know, this is a very much male-dominated industry. So from that, such a small number of population, how they can grow and how we can work together for the sustainable future of maritime workforce. So therefore, we set up the definition of seafarer sustainability, meaning that strategic thinking of ensuring sustainable supply of competent and qualified seafarers to meet the future demands of maritime industries, keeping in mind how to increase the human development capacity in regions as well as gender diversity. With that, we came up with 4 research questions. Next slide, please. So the first question that we asked was to investigate the current knowledge about gender diversity in African maritime education and training. What is happening there? Then we also wanted to know the numbers, the current trends in enrollment, recruitment, and retention of both men and women within African MET institutions, and how those trends currently impact on the are expected to impact the supply of qualified seafarers for the maritime industry. So without the clear numbers, we cannot really understand that how we can move forward. So this is basically very much focused on the quantitative statistics and the data that we're trying to collect, not the estimation, but from the actual numbers. Number 3 is what factors may contribute to the barriers and opportunities in recruiting and retaining women seafarers, also the African seafarers. So we also wanted to know from the actual African maritime stakeholders that what sort of challenges and opportunities, are there any different from the global challenges and opportunities? Finally, we also wanted to extract or collect a lot of examples of good practices currently employed by the global and also African maritime stakeholders. Okay, and the next slide, please. To do this, we developed a methodology to utilizing the existing data and informations, collecting from the literature review, document analysis, secondary data analysis from the existing statistics and figures, and also the website search from the official website of the MET institution, for example. And then contrasting with this existing data and information with the empirical data that we are freshly collected, like mapping the MET institutions by three different regions: Eastern, Southern, Western, Western, Central and Northern Africa, which is a kind of more holistic African continent. But more regional focus, Eastern, Southern, and Western Africa, was focused on the collecting the data of the MIT institutions, for example, and some statistics that you can see on the screen. I would say that it was extremely difficult to collect those data. And one of the key of the success of collecting such a valuable data is basically the Dr. Renis Ojuara, who is originally from Africa, and a lot of her effort. That is also something that we wanted to very much highlight, that collecting data is not that easy. So now I'm very much happy to introduce and hand over to a very competent postdoc researcher, Dr. Renis Ojuara, to talk about the key findings from this study. Renis, please.
Thank you so much, Professor Momoko, for that wonderful introduction of the project. I will now take you through our key findings, and we'll start with the... Okay. Can you see? Sorry. Okay, sorry for that. So based on our analysis, maritime education and training in Africa is undergoing a growth and rapidly improving since it started. So today we have identified approximately 150 MIT institutions, both public and private. And strikingly, that the highest number of these institutions were recorded in Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa, as you can see from the map. And this significant high number in African countries reflects a strong commitment to advancing maritime education and training in the region. It also indicates that African countries are well positioned to become the prominent seafarer hubs in the future. So following the mapping of the maritime education and training institutions across the region, our next step was to analyze students' enrollment rates to better understand the general interest in maritime programs. Enrollment trends in MIT programs serve as a key metric for evaluating and predicting future seafarer supply. And this analysis revealed notable variation across countries. As you can see, from Tanzania and South Africa also stood out, recording over 5,000 students over the past 10 years. On our right figure, we also examined enrollment trends over the years from 2015 to 2024. And we noticed an upward trajectory since then, and there was a little bit decline on 2017, and this is because of some issues in the industry where there were collapse of major shipping companies, especially in China in 2016. So still on the topic of enrollment, we also took a closer look at sea-going programs and how they attracted students in the region, and noticed that there was higher enrollment figures in marine engineering compared to nautical sciences. And the marine engineering was preferred mostly because it's known to be prestigious and also has higher demand in the industry. But it's also important to note that both marine engineering and nautical sciences are important in the industry because they all provide opportunities to work in shipping companies, both locally and also internationally. So we also tried to identify future trends based on the data that we collected. And from the graph, you can see that there was a strong and consistent positive correlation between the current enrollment rates and the future growth potential. So our findings suggest that if current conditions persist, including sustained interest in maritime careers, institutional capacity, and also industry demands, we can reasonably predict a continued increase in student enrollment across MAT institutions in the region. So apart from enrollment patterns, we also looked at graduation rates because, okay, there's one thing to enroll and also another thing to graduate from or complete the program. So on this, our analysis revealed an overall upward trend over the past decade, reflecting a positive trajectory in student progress and program completion at MAT institutions. However, it's also important to note that in the year 2019, there was a decline in enrollment in graduation because of the decline in enrollment in 2017 that affected this the progress. But even though it was affected in this year, we also noted that there were some resilient and the institutions were able to bounce back and the graduation rates went high again. So we also decided to check now the enrollment rates, compare the enrollment rates and the graduation rates. And if you can see from the second graph is that despite the general growth in enrollment, graduation rates consistently remained lower than enrollment figures. So this gap points to a range of persistent challenges that hinder students' retention and completion. Among the most prominent issues are high tuition fees, limited financial support, and many others. Then we decided to look at the gender representation among the students in MAT institutions, and which is a critical dimension explored in this study. So according to our findings, is that female students' enrollment accounted for approximately 23% of the total students in African MAT institutions over the past decade. So even though this figure was low, it's important to note that it showed a stronger gender balance than the global average, which is currently at 1.28%. And then looking more closely at individual institutions, we also found out that Bandari Maritime Academy in Kenya tried or performed a little bit better with around 25% enrollment of students over the past decade. And there were other institutions, as you can see from the graph, that did a little bit less in terms of enrolling female students. But the positive side is that even though the performance was low, they still stood out, especially when you compare their percentages with the global average. Okay, so having explored the current capacity of MAT institutions in Africa, we then turned our focus to the next phase in the seafaring pipeline, which is recruitment. Understanding how MAT graduates transition into the workforce is essential to assessing the overall strength and sustainability of the maritime sector in the region. So our findings reveal a noteworthy insight where the actual number of African seafarers appear to be higher than what is currently being reported by the global maritime reports. So we also noticed that there was significant imbalance in the recruitment of crew members between offices and ratings. And also notice that there is over-reliance of non-officer roles, not only limits current career progression for the many African seafarers, but also reflects systemic barriers in training, certification, and international recognition. So looking at the gender representation among seafarer positions, there was also limited or underrepresentation of women in seafaring roles, which is a critical indicator of inclusivity and equity in the maritime sector. So our findings revealed that women accounted for only 4% of the total African seafarer population at the in the selected African countries. And although, again, this figure or this percentage was a little bit higher than the average, the global average, which is 1.28%. So what are some of the challenges that were mentioned by the MAT institutions as well as the maritime administrations that participated in this study? So there were several issues, and some of them were inadequate funding, lack of access to sea time placements, inadequate training equipment, among others. And then we have the African seafarers faced challenges like increased unemployment rates, as well as image of African seafarers out there. Apart from that, we also noticed that there were some racial biases in some employment practices, and this is an example of a case study from South Africa where we found out that majority of the seafarers that identified as Black were found in lower ranking positions compared to their counterparts who identified as white, colored, or Asian. Sorry for my voice. And apart from training barriers, we also identified legal barriers. And these legal barriers were mainly on issues to do with compliance of STCW convention. And you can see from the graph that few African countries feature in the IMO whitelist, around 24%, and only 24 African countries, and only 10 African countries out of the 50 countries are recognized by the European Maritime Safety Agency. So what are some of the good practices identified? So that we identified good practices at also institutional level and those at global level. So the ones from institutional level, and these ones were mentioned by the MAT institutions that participated in this study, included industry partnership. Some of them offer scholarships and financial support to their students. Others try to increase gender diversity by having gender inclusion programs. Others have state-of-the-art simulator rooms that help at least have some hands-on practice or learning instead of waiting for the sea time placement. So we had several global initiatives to promote gender equality and diversity in the report, but just to mention a few, including rewriting women into maritime history, diversity in maritime program, All Aboard Alliance, and many others. So here to conclude our analysis, we have developed a set of actionable recommendations carefully categorized according to the key maritime stakeholders involved in shaping the future of the industry. So this recommendation aimed to address the gaps identified in our study and help unlock the full potential of Africans' maritime workforce. So if I just take one example, the global and regional stakeholders, we encourage them to have a strategic partnership with the government and MIT institutions to create industry-led training, also to help expand access to sea time placements, actively support gender diversity and inclusion by employing more African women seafarers, provide financial support, and also establish mentorship programs to help in career growth and also guide recruitment of young seafarers. Thank you so much for your listening, and we welcome all the questions.
Thank you so much, Renis and Momoko. That was a wonderful overview of all your work, so thank you. Okay, we will move on to the question portion of this webinar. So I'd like to introduce the rest of our panel. So joining Momoko and Renis is also Dr. Olivia Swift, who is the Head of Maritime Systems at Lloyd Register Foundation. And also we're pleased to welcome Sam Megwa, the Strategic Director of the EU Gulf of Guinea Interregional Network, and also a consultant to Lloyd's Register Foundation on Africa. So we're very keen to get your questions. There's a Q&A function in this chat. So at the panel along the top, there's the chat, and next to it says Q&A. So please do open that and pop your questions in there, and we can go through and get to that. If I could ask all the panel to turn their cameras on. And actually, is Sam still with us? Has he dropped off the call, perhaps?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you
You're
hear
there?
me?
Hi.
Yes, I am.
Couldn't see you immediately on my screen. And that's perfect, because I'm going to go straight to you to kick us off with our first question, please, while everyone's typing their own questions. So Sam Megwa, thank you very much for joining us on this panel. You have a great deal of experience in the maritime space, building influential partnerships with governments and industry leaders. So could you start by sharing your thoughts on the findings of this project, please, particularly from the angle of what industry can do to support these potential changes?
No, thank you very much, Lydia. I would like to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for this opportunity to contribute to this webinar. And I also want to thank and commend the presenters earlier, Momoko and Renis, and also the Lloyd's Register Foundation and the World Maritime University for this comprehensive report. It is a timely and essential report, which in my view gives us a very clear message that Africa has huge potential to help solve the global shortage of seafarers. I like the fact that it offers a clear and honest picture of the challenges and opportunities for Africa and women in the maritime sector. I was very impressed by the Kenya's standout performance, where women represent about 33% of seafarers, which is far above the global average. I think Kenya's example shows that progress is possible when the right support systems and mechanisms are in place. I was encouraged to see that more young people are joining maritime education and training programs across Africa. That was quite impressive, especially marine engineering. It shows that there is a rising interest among African youth, but we still need to encourage more students to enroll, especially women, to enroll in programs such as nautical science, because in addition to engineers, we also need deck officer, and I speak as a former deck officer myself. Now, one insight that I got from the report, which was very helpful, was that of the 54,000 seafarers or thereabout, 72% are rating or ratings, which made me think, oh, there is a real need and opportunity to support the career progression of ratings to officer level and not just focusing on cadets. So it made me wonder, of the 38,000 ratings or thereabout, how many of them have aspirations to become officers? How many of them are even women? And how can we help fast track that progression? So that was a real insight for me, because we tend to always focus on cadets and new entrants, when really there might be ratings that we can help fast track to become officers and fill that officer shortage that we know we have. Now, in terms of what the shipping industry can do to help, apart from what has already been discussed about offering more sea time placements, building long-term partnerships with Africa, supporting women careers, and recognizing Africa's COC, a major challenge that I think is sometimes overlooked is the disconnect between what we train Africa seafarers and cadets on and what international shipping companies actually need. As an African cadet or officer, even if I attend a recognized institution, I complete my sea time, and I hold a valid international certificate of competency. Is that enough to secure a job, say within 12 months on an international vessel? Some might say no, and some might say yes. But I think we need to better understand what international employers are looking for beyond just the certificates themselves. Do they need experience on specific types of vessels or flag? Do they need information about the quality of the training that are being given in Africa? Do they have concerns about certain soft skills and language barriers, or even the behaviors of seafarers, African seafarers on ships? I think there needs to be more direct engagement between African institutions and global ship owners and employers in order to bridge the information gap, so that training is aligned with global industry demand and not just the local regional standards or expectations that there may be. So just to close, it is very clear that the opportunity is there. I believe Africa is ready to play the big role that they can play, but I think the industry must go beyond just hiring. It must look at investing in people development and therefore helping build that pipeline of talent that is needed in Africa and, of course, the rest of the world. So I'll stop there for now, Lydia. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Sam. Some fascinating points there. And already people are responding to that on the chat as well. Alison Layton says she agrees, and understanding the barriers which limit progression is important. Jen Ella from the John B. Laxon Foundation Maritime University in the Philippines has said that a suggestion to include recommendation for shipping companies to establish a career pathing program for ratings to be promoted. So again, that picking up on your idea of progression as well. So already started the discussions going. Thank you very much. Olivia, perhaps you could also give us your first sort of main takeaways from the report to kick us off further.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Sam, some really thoughtful suggestions there. I suppose my two key points, or my main takeaway, is perhaps a slightly less positive take on Sam's, although maybe flip side of the same coin. So I think there is lots of promise in that's reflected in the report, as Sam said. But I think there's also still a lot of complacency. You know, what the shortage of officers isn't new for the industry, and it doesn't take a lot to think that there's great potential in the 50% of the human population that is female, and there's a great potential in the massive youthful continent of Africa. But as you've alluded to, Sam, we need to be proactive. We can't just expect it to magically happen. I mean, I think we will have more women and Africans coming through if we did nothing, but if we want to scale up at speeds, we can't be complacent. So this is where the recommendations and your additional suggestions really are so valuable. So that's my main takeaway. And then the second, I suppose, is just to stress that this isn't about moving to find the latest labour source as if seafarers are expendable. we have to make sure that, because typically what happens is that economic development in a region means that over time, eventually seafaring becomes less desirable when you can earn an equivalent amount on land. So we, alongside, and this isn't what the report is about, but of course, alongside, we need to make sure that seafaring is able to compete with shoreside roles as national and regional economic development progresses. And that means working conditions that are increasingly decent and working terms. So that's things like contract lengths and some of the, really big structural barriers that do remain. So we need to make sure that this isn't a race to the bottom, essentially, which I don't think it is, but I think that's an important point to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. More great points. Rennis, I wonder if I could come to you here, sort of based on what Sam and Olivia were saying. I know that you did a lot of actually talking to the MET institutions in Africa as part of your research. And I suppose the question is, in your opinion, are maritime training institutions in general open and able to sort of take on these potential areas of innovation and change, in your opinion?
Yeah, thank you so much, Lydia, for that question. Yes, based on the mapping that I did, African institutions are very ready because just by seeing how their progress in terms of expanding in the institution, the institutions are currently expanding, and some of them already have the necessary equipment like simulator rooms. Some of them say they already have those. So it's just limited resources that others have in order to be able to get to or adapt the interventions that are necessary for their students to have the quality or a standard training that is needed. So they are ready, but they don't have the means. So we need to invest in African institutions and support, especially the female students, because majority are complaining about the high cost of education, because also they have to renew their certificates after some years, and it's a lot of money to be doing this after a few years. So a lot of support is needed for them to be able to progress in their career.
Thank you. Thank you, Rennet. Just going to the meeting chat, and please do keep sending your questions in, particularly on the Q&A, but I am peeking through the chat as well. Alison Layton asked, did the research include any thoughts and findings on beginning maritime education from an early school age? And did the research on this look at jobs at sea or include jobs ashore too? Momoka, I wonder if you could take this and talk about if that was included in the methodology or not, but also expand to talk about that wider maritime education that can start much earlier.
Thank you very much for these important questions, and very much thanking for the participants for the active posing the questions. And I think this is definitely the case. So of course, the education has to start early. And this was also similar for the other in a much bigger scale of like maritime and oceans, because the entry point could be anything. The maritime can be a big, but could be a small sectors, because Africa has coastlines, but then there are many countries also landlocked or a little bit more, inland, which may not be really exposed to the maritime and oceans. So I think this is also something that the government can also promote, because Africa is one of the continent who is very much interested in the blue economy. So with that kind of strategy, the government can also include the curriculums and learning activities or some kind of cultural activities, arts collaborations within the early stage educations, so that there is a lot of exposure. And also our reports, if you actually go into the more like a conclusion and recommendation part, we also trying to address the importance of early education. So how can we even achieve this 25% of women seafarers? And of course, this has to start much, much earlier because we cannot, have all the women to stay on board the ship. So that means that the first entry, it has to be like kind of STEM field, like science, technology, and mathematics and engineering field has to also be open to women's entry. So ideally 50 and 50%. And then eventually there's some girls choosing the maritime education and training, and then some will also choosing the seafaring occupation. So eventually there will be a little bit more smaller population, but I think the key is to start early and then try to encourage more girls to study in those areas. And just a very final short note, I also completely agree with what Olivia mentioned, that there will be it is maritime is a wide kind of how can I say opportunity, the job markets. So even though some seafarer, the cadets may not get immediate access to the sea occupations or sea jobs, there could be many other potential jobs. So I think Africa also have to strategically think to what kind of maritime jobs they can offer. Maybe even starting with a shore-based, maybe them eventually going to sea, or more kind of diversifying the opportunities, not just only one way. And if somebody's stuck there, then they cannot go no longer, This is not that, this shouldn't be the case. So I think we have to also like kind of engineering the maritime education and training somehow to be more open and providing a wider options for the young people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to go to the Q&A section now, and Yusuke Mori, excuse me if I didn't pronounce that right, but has asked, what is the future model in maritime education and training? What is the role of METIs and the shipping industry in education and training for future seafarers? Who'd like to kick us off with that one?
Well, I'll come in. I'll just speak certainly from an industry perspective. I might leave it to my other colleagues to speak from an MET perspective, since they are more qualified to do so. I think in terms of an industry perspective, if you look at what is the changes that are happening in our industry today, the industry is currently undergoing an energy transition, as well as a digitalization transformation. So one thing we need to be mindful of is that African seafarers are not left behind in that development. I think there is data from the Maritime Just Transition Task Force that about 800,000 or more seafarers need to be upskilled by 2030 or something like that. So that is a huge number. And if you look at that, I'm sure quite a significant amount of them are Africans. So there needs to be, in my view, an updating or upgrading of training curricula in African METs to make sure that they meet the realities of the now and of the future as well. So that African seafarers, not just in terms of employability, but also in terms of safety, they're able to manage new technologies, they're able to operate new type of equipment that are related to the green type of transition that we're going through now.
Anything to add to that then, Momoko and Rennes?
I don't actually. I just recall, the memory that we had a very interesting conversation with Olivia, that she mentioned that is there any kind of shortcut for the women to not with, going through the traditional MET curriculum, but in the era of digitalization and all these modern technologies, is there any new MET model? So that might also partly answering to the questions from the Captain Mori that, well, we haven't really investigated yet, but there could be many interesting ideas which we haven't really thought about. So I don't know if Olivia wants to add something on this.
Olivia, microphone.
Yes, I feel the least qualified to answer. So nonetheless, I'll ask it. But I do think, to go back to the question, I think we are entering an era where MET institutions can be more directing and less responsive within the regulatory framework. And maybe that's a naive thing to say, but we're going through a lot of change in industry, as Sam said. There's an opportunity to be more responsive and be in more closer dialogue with industry. And I think the sorts of models that Momoko's talking about then, I don't know. I mean, we're talking really about potentially trying to reinvent the maritime education system, which we won't necessarily do before the end of the hour. But I think METs have a role in the imagining of that. So yes, could we think about a short track to up women's involvement? Do they really need to have been seafarers for X number of years to take up these anticipated new roles? So as we're thinking about how seafaring is changing, which it will be, and we're thinking about mass code alongside STCW, this is the time for us all to expand our sounds very whimsical, to imagine alternative models and to have those conversations, because that's how change and real opportunity could potentially be unlocked, is how I see it. But as I said, I'm not at the coalface.
Thank you, Olivia. I think that links nicely to a next question that's come in from Elisabetta, thinking about different sort of models. Her question is, do you believe that programs like scholarships in European countries or other countries which are currently supplying the seafarers could help to cover the gap between the levels of the education or the recognition level? Could this be undertaken by shipping companies as part of further education or as part of bilateral agreements between the country of origin and the receiving country for the educational programme? There's a bit more on this. Or maybe there could be programmes for educators as well who could be accredited as capable to teach in their countries of origin. Would these solutions be considered as viable? Thank you. So I guess they're thinking about sort of exchange really in training. What do we think to that? Who'd like to kick that off first? Momoko, I know that you have students from all over the world, so perhaps you are best to start us off here, please.
Okay, yeah, I will just quickly kick off the conversation. So, yes, I think the idea is kind of even industry collaborations or the kind of multilateral agreement, and that's a very interesting ideas. At the same time, the maritime education training could be also culturally sensitive in some way too. So I think the early exposure might be also quite safe to say that the maritime education training can be locally situated, as somehow rooted, because I think this industry is a very interesting one. Quite often that the owners are messy, right? So that open registry is a big good example. So it's quite complicated that which flags and which countries. So I think education, in my a little bit kind of traditional viewpoint, should be rooted or located primarily in the countries, because that's basically for the countries to really consider strategically that this education can be somehow the growth of the countries. But I think maybe the later stage, like kind of lifelong learning opportunities, I would think why not also internationalize open up more opportunities, because then by the time the maritime professionals are more globally exposed. So I think that, in my view, maybe the two levels, but this is just my kind of observations. And WMU is also partly contributing to that kind of pictures. The building the capacity of the countries, at the same time opening, educating the international educators. So yeah, that's my view. Thank you.
I will go straight into a next question, because we're getting a few in now. What interventions can effectively address the employment gap hindering the increased representation of African seafarers in the global maritime workforce? As a South African institution, we are confronted with the challenge of placing our qualified nautical and shore-based graduates who are currently unable to find employment, and that's from Zama. So what do we do to address that gap? Sam, would you like to start to take that one, or anyone else want to jump in?
No, I'm happy to take that. This is something I'm very passionate about, because I just think that there is a low-hanging fruit there for everybody to benefit from, in the sense that Africa has the population, have the interest as well, because the African youth, many of them are interested in going to sea. The global maritime industry is experiencing a shortage, and is being focused of experiencing even greater shortage in the future. So in my mind, what I think is needed is partnership. It's about saying, we have the people in Africa, you have the ships in the global maritime industry. So how do we now work together to make sure that placements on vessels for training is provided, and we can be innovative in the way we do that. I remember during my time over 30 years ago, when I finished my training and I was looking for placement on board ship, I approached the company, and the company said, well, we can put you on board ship as a cadet, but we can only pay you if you're prepared to work as an AD as well. So they gave me the option of, whereby on deck during the day, I'm working as an AB and earning some money. And then at night, I'm working as a cadet and learning to be an officer. And that was the only way the company said they would pay for my time on board the ship. So they were creative. So I took it. And here I am today. So I think there are many ways, I'm sure, if we get together, we can come up with ideas as how we can address this lack of sea time opportunities, because it's a major bottleneck. If people finish from college and they cannot get sea time, they're not going to hang around. What they're going to do is find something else to do in order to provide for themselves and their family. And then you lose them. So we need to catch them early and give them the opportunity to progress within the career that they have chosen, especially as we need them. So in my short answer will be partnerships. We have to partner, in my view, and we'll have to be innovative in the way we do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Partnership is always key. I'll move swiftly on to the next question. I think I know who's going to go to. This is the LRF focus question, Olivia. So Deborah has said that LRF are very focused on safety. What do you think LRF think needs to happen to ensure new recruits feel psychologically safe at sea? And I've seen other comments as well, people sort of talking about seafaring needs to be an attractive job for people. So yeah, think about the psychological safety at sea.
Well, it's thank you, Deborah. It's an important question, and I sometimes think to myself, 70% of the world is ocean. One of the major ocean industries is shipping. Tiny percentage of those working on ships are women, and when they are, all too often they're not safe. So if you sort of think about that, how that looks on a map, it's really quite stark. So it's absolutely something we need to address, and it's this is a multi-pronged answer. It's in our LRF space. I think there is a part for awareness raising and learning for men and women in their training, for sure. There's obviously a big part that involves company policy. There's a degree of personal resilience involved too. There are some fabulous initiatives, some of which are featured in the report around allyship, which is encouraging, that I think ICE1 is leading on, that's encouraging maritime colleagues of any gender to stand up and speak out in support of those moments of discrimination, say. So there is a lot happening. It needs to continue. We need to share good practice. We need to also to evaluate and have benchmarks for this. And I do think upping diversity will also help. I mean, it's a bit chicken and egg, because if you want to up the number of women, of course, you need to make it an attractive working environment, but equally by having a better gender balance, it does promote a better practice in this realm as well. So, you know, there's lots that needs to be done, with some promising signs featured in the report.
Thank you. We are fast coming to the end of our time. We haven't had a chance to answer all the questions. As mentioned at the beginning, though, we will take each of those and put them on the website and answer them there. I can see some really interesting ones that we haven't quite got to. Barry, some great questions around fishing. So we will come to this, I promise. But just before we wrap up, if I could go around to each of the panel and just ask for a sort of 20-second, anything else you'd like to say, wrap up. Before we go, please. Sam, perhaps if I could start with you.
Yeah, I think, you know, as I said earlier, I think there's a great opportunity here for Africa, and I believe Africa is ready. It's whether the world is ready. And I think unless we work together, we will not be able to address this problem and therefore leverage the opportunity. So I think it's collaboration. And I think what you have done with this report is provide the world with some real data-driven solutions that can be implemented. So I think it's very much a case of, okay, how do we start to implement some, if not all of this? And we need to start now. Let's not wait until 2050 when the energy transition is upon us. We need to start now so that we can keep our ships moving, making sure we supply goods and cargoes to people all around the world, which is a very important role that seafarers play. As an ex-seafarer, it's something that I'm very proud of, and we must keep it going. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you for that. Momoko, any closing words?
Thank you very much. It's also, I'm partly answering to the question from the Richmond about the decarbonization. I think now I see, as the head of maritime education training at the World Maritime University, I see a lot of increasing interest in the maritime education training. So especially also like in the decarbonization, digitalizations, the much ahead of the regulation comes, we already talking about the training in order to make sure that the seafarers are safe. So in this kind of context, the role of MET is growing. So there is a lot of opportunities. And also this report mainly focused on the Africa, but we are also not forgetting the other parts of the world, because this is just the beginning. And also this lens of looking at small populations is actually quite important to understand the global challenges. So with that, I would like to make my concluding remarks. Thank you very much for these opportunities.
Thank you, Momoko. Renis, if you have a short closing for us, that'd be great. If there's anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much again for the opportunity. And I would just like to say that there are promising strides that have been made in Africa, in MET institutions, as well as maritime administration, based on the shared good practices that already mentioned in the report. And some of them are actually reaching out for collaboration, which is a good start from sharing the report with a few of them, and they're already positive about the changes in the future. So keep up the good work, and please implement all the recommendations that are in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Renis. And Olivia, any final thoughts?
Just really to say thank you all so much for joining us today, and to our panelists and everyone who's been involved. The engagements and the questions have been beyond my expectations. I'm really encouraged, and to pick up on Sam's point about collaboration, I really would encourage folk to be in touch with ideas, because I think there's a role for everyone here, and the LRM has a part to play, but others do too. And so let's come up with these solutions and encourage the conversation to keep going. Lydia, is there a contact mechanism that we want to flag, even if it's just the info@LR Foundation,
Yeah,
perhaps?
I have just added the links to the report onto our chat. That's also to be found on our website. And on our website, that's all our contact details, anything you need to know. So please do look at Lloyd's Register Foundation website and stay in touch. And so that leaves me just to say thank you once again to Momoka and Renis for presenting, the rest of our panelists, Sam and Olivia. Thank you so much for your thoughts and your expertise. I think it's been a wonderful hour. Thank you everyone for spending it with us. I hope it was useful, and keep in touch, and we'll keep the good work going. Thanks all. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.